When I started this series, Sonic Highways was the most recent thing that the band had done, and I expected I'd be able to finish the series with this hopeful message that whatever they did next could potentially be a step back onto the right direction. Then they released a pretty damn good EP, which we'll review later, which I thought could end the series on a pretty positive note. Then they released whatever the hell this thing is, and we have to end this series on a sour note now. Wasting Light was by all means a huge success, receiving some of the most positive critical and fan reception of any of their albums since the 90s, becoming the first album by the band to top the Billboard 200, and it earned the band another 4 Grammys. After a year of touring, the band announced that they were going to take a break. However, Dave announced in January 2013 that they had begun work on a new album. After some radio silence throughout 2013, it was announced later in the year that they were recording the album with Butch Vig and that they would get back into playing shows at the end of the year. In May 2014, the album was finally announced alongside a TV series of the same name. Sonic Highways was intended to be a huge celebration of the band's 20th anniversary as well as American rock music. Each song saw the band writing and recording in a different iconic studio across 8 different cities in America. Each song would be inspired by the music of each city, which would be explored in each episode of the TV series. Also, musicians from each city would play an instrument or sing on a song. These musicians included Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, Peter Starr and Skeeter Thompson from Scream, Zach Brown, Gary Clark Jr., Joe Walsh from the Eagles, the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie, and finally Tony Visconti and Christine Young, both known for their work with David Bowie. There was so much potential for this album, so many exciting things that they could have done with this idea. And the TV show was so goddamn good, and honestly one of my favourite documentaries about music to ever exist. But my god, this album is one of the most confusing mixed bags I've ever heard. Not quite as bad as Concrete and Gold, but still pretty damn meh. The album starts off with not only a bang, but a massive fiery explosion. The first song, Something from Nothing, at first was not one that I really liked at all, but when I listened to it over and over again, I fell head over heels in love with it. It's very reminiscent of the sort of stuff that they were doing on Echoes, where it has that huge arena rock sound that the band display on their singles, but with this classic rock / blues rock edge to it. This song has this incredible blend of styles and genres that simultaneously seem to blend alt-rock, funk and grunge together into this weird amalgamation of sound which sounds massive and full of life. The guitar riffs are all incredible, they really make the most of the 3 guitarists here, and keyboardist Rami Jaffee gets to shine all over the place, especially with the Stevie Wonder sounding clav in the verse. Then everything builds up into this gigantic, euphoric explosion of noise and energy. I get goosebumps whenever I listen to the build-up of this thing, and Chris's solo is so damn incredible. The production is beautiful, and Butch Vig does a fantastic job of bringing out the best of every band member here. Everyone gets a cool place to shine. Dave's vocals are incredible. This song is just Foo Fighters at their absolute best. And then we get the Feast and the Famine, which is just as fantastic. It's inspired by the hardcore punk scene in Washington DC where Dave grew up. It's a fast-paced, exciting and fiery punk rock song with really huge guitar riffs that are abrasive, in your face and full of this snotty attitude that all the best punk music has. But there's also that huge arena sound that we know from the band, which is especially shown in the bridge where it has this really huge descending sound which feels like you're falling to the ground, only to get back and soar once again. This song is one of, if not my favourite track on this album. It's a very, very tight race between the first 2 tracks. These 2 songs gave me really high hopes for the album. I mean, how can they ruin it after such incredible bangers? I spoke way too soon. Congregation was recorded in Nashville and characteristically has the 70s classic southern rock sound. And the guitar riffs are really pretty damn good. In fact, the instrumentation is pretty sick on this song. But Dave's lyrics and melodies are terrible. The melodies aren't completely uninspired, they're just so damn repetitive that they end up sounding really annoying and irritating to listen to, especially on the verses. The lyrics are the perfect example of one of the biggest problems on this album. Although lyrically the first 2 tracks aren't too bad, they're not perfect, and after them the lyrics just become absolutely awful. When writing the lyrics, Dave would take a look back over the transcripts of the interviews he did for the documentary and take out little keywords and stuff and put them into the lyrics. This is something that almost never works. It sounds so forced and leads to these songs with poetic statements that seem to mean almost nothing because they don't really fit into the context of the song. Congregation may not be the worst offender of this on the album, but it's definitely one of the worst. And it's such a shame because everything else is so close to being good. Hell, the guitar solo on this song is one of the best moments of the entire album and gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. But the rest of the song is an overly long, terribly written mess. The next song, What Have I Do / God Is My Witness, is even worse. It was recorded in Texas, so follows that southern rock sound again, to the point where it sounds like Foo Fighters covering Lynyrd Skynyrd, except the really bad Lynyrd Skynyrd B-side and not like Sweet Home Alabama or anything like that. The song ends up being one of the most boring, bloated and overly long songs that the band have ever done. It's basically a 4-part song, none of which is really that interesting at all. All the instrumentation is pretty bland and run-of-the-mill, the lyrics are so cliche to the point of sounding like it could be a parody, and although the God Is My Witness part is catchy and kind of nice to listen to, everything else is so repetitive that to get to this tiny section is this incredible chore, and even that section is repeated so many times that you get bored. If you want to write a multi-layered 6-minute song, then go ahead, but actually justify the length of this track instead of just repeating the same thing over and over and over again until just eventually ending, which is exactly what this song does. It's then followed by Outside, which is definitely a big step up, although still nowhere near as good as the first 2 tracks. The song sounds much more like a Foo Fighters song than the last couple, with a huge catchy chorus and pretty solid instrumentation. The song was recorded in the Californian desert as the famous Rancho de la Luna, where bands like Queens of the Stone Age, Kyuss and also Arctic Monkeys have recorded over the years. It's basically the home of Californian stoner rock, and there is some of that influence heard on the track with the spacious vocals in the verses and that huge guitar solo from Joe Walsh. But the track actually ends up just sounding like Foo Fighters doing a Foo Fighters song. There's none of the blending of sounds and genres of the other tracks to the point where this could have just been a song scrapped from Wasting Light. The guitar solo has very strong Wall-era Pink Floyd vibes, which I think elevates the song massively. The song isn't offensively bad, and it's one of the few from the album that I actually found myself returning to since its release, but I can't say it's the most exciting or memorable song in the world. In fact, it's probably one of the more forgettable songs on the album. The following track, In the Clear, is another run-of-the-mill Foo Fighters song. This is another song that could have easily been an outtake from Wasting Light. The main riff is pretty cool, but the structure of the song is so generic and forgettable. The use of the jazz band definitely expands the track, but the song doesn't really utilize it as well as it could have. The melodies throughout the verses and chorus are nothing special, and lyrically it's just as much as a mess as the other songs. Outside may have been slightly forgettable, but it had that incredible Joe Walsh solo to make it special. In the Clear has nothing. It's not terrible, but it's also not great. It's just kind of there. Whenever I think back to this album, this is the song that leaps out to me the least. Then we get the song Subterranean, which seems to be completely overlooked by everyone, but I personally think it's one of the best songs on the album. It's one of their most underrated songs by far. It's this very atmospheric, chilled out slow jam, which gives me very strong Death Cab for Cutie vibes, which is probably why Ben Gibbard sings on the song. The guitar work on this thing utilizes the 3 guitarists in a really great way, where you have one guitarist playing an acoustic guitar, one doing clean guitar chords, and one using an E-bow to create this very fuzzy, atmospheric, sliding, droning riff. Listening to this song sounds like you're slowly driving along an empty road in the blazing sunshine. I can definitely see why people would throw it to the wayside because it's not really one that instantly jumps out at you, but it's one that I found stuck with me upon multiple listens and one that I felt got even better when I watched the TV show for context. The album comes to a close with the 7-minute long I Am a River, a big triumphant song which pulls together the themes of the album into this epic closer, with easily the worst chorus the band have ever done. The chorus is the most repetitive thing I've ever heard in a Foo Fighters song, with Dave just shouting I am a river with the exact same melody over and over and over and over again. The chorus repeats so many times in the song as well that it just becomes a joke. This is a 7-minute song and it couldn't get a chorus better than this? The guitar riffs are definitely pretty good and I do like the verses, but my god, that chorus is laughably terrible. I love the strings that come in towards the end. In fact, I pretty much like everything about this song, but that chorus is goddamn horrendous. It's a terrible way to bring the album to a close. And if you're thinking the album's over pretty quickly, that's because it's really damn short. Although every song clocks in an average of 5 minutes, there's only 8 songs, and that definitely ends up having a huge impact on the album. Wasting Light had a few forgettable songs, but it managed to counteract them with more great songs. Sonic Highways is basically a 50-50 split between good and bad, and because there's very few songs on the album, I end up leaving it with a very sour taste in my mouth. The instrumentation isn't even the problem on these songs, it's Dave's melodies and lyrics. They're so uninspired and terribly written, at many points the album becomes an absolute chore to listen to. And it's a massive shame because the TV show is so great and the idea behind this album had so much potential for something interesting and unique. But this album is just an absolute mess. Sonic Highways had a huge world tour which ended up being delayed for a short period of time after Dave fell off a stage and broke his leg. After the tour was prematurely ended by the Paris terrorist attacks, a mysterious countdown clock appeared on their website, and on November 23rd, 2015 they released the Saint Cecilia EP. The EP was dedicated to the victims of the Paris attacks. It was made from a collection of song parts from unused songs left off previous albums. And it's safe to say that this is probably the best post-Wasting Light thing the band have ever done. The EP is almost like a blend of the last 2 albums. It has that post-grunge throwback sound of Wasting Light with the more classic rock twang of Sonic Highways. The title track is an absolute banger with a really great chorus and melody. This song seems to be the complete opposite of Sonic Highways, where the instrumentation isn't very interesting, but the lyrics and melodies are all really great. I'd go as far as to say that this is the best song they've done since Sonic Highways. Sean is a pretty bright, catchy song that is almost reminiscent of the first album. It's full of very simple riffs and instrumentations, and some lyrics and melodies that are hardly special, but the energy and speed of this track is so infectious, although the bridge of the song is literally just the bridge from The Feast and the Famine, except nowhere near as exciting. Save Your Breath is a really fast and exciting punk rock song with some pretty good guitar riffs and that heavily distorted vocal sound heard in songs like White Limo. The song has a chorus melody that is very characteristically Foo's. The song is this explosive little jam. It's not the most incredible thing I've ever heard and far from the best from the EP, but it's a really solid song and one that I return to regularly. Iron Rooster is a slow acoustic song and it is god awful. I was really disappointed by this song because normally their acoustic songs are some of the best that they do. But this song has some of the cringiest lyrics I've ever heard in a Foo Fighters song. They sound like they were written in 5 minutes and just thrown onto the track. And it's a shame because the instrumentation is very pretty. It gives me strong Parachutes era Coldplay vibes. But these lyrics are something else and I can't get past them. The EP ends with The Never Ending Sigh, which, similar to Save Your Breath, is a fast punk rock song which blasts at you with full force. Although the riff is a tiny bit repetitive, I still think it's pretty awesome and the chorus on this thing is huge and incredibly catchy. This song sounds like the sort of thing that Sonic Highway spent ages trying to be but never quite managed to do correctly. It's post-grunge at its absolute best. After the EP, the band announced that they were entering an indefinite hiatus. This led to many rumours that the band were breaking up for good. In March 2016, the band released a video where they jokingly said that Dave was leaving to go solo and that the singer from 98 Degrees would be replacing him. Later on in the year, Dave announced that the band would spend much of 2017 recording a new album. Struggling with recovering from breaking his leg, Dave secluded himself away from the rest of the band and aimed to take a year away from making music. However, 6 months later, he started to write lyrics for the new album. For the next album, Dave wanted to make an album where he booked 2 nights at the Hollywood Bowl and recorded it live in front of 20,000 people. However, after realizing PJ Harvey had already done something similar, and after the rest of the band requested that they just went into the studio normally without any of the gimmicks of the previous few albums, this idea was put to rest. So they decided for the next album they'd just go back to how they recorded their first 4 albums, just going into the studio and trying to make songs that they loved without focusing on making a double album, a mixture of that double album, recording a garage, or recording in 8 different cities and being inspired by the music of each city. Describing the album as both Sgt. Pepper's meets Motorhead and like Slayer making pet sounds, Dave Grohl promised a heavy and brutal album that also had many elements of pop music in it. On June 21st, they released a single called Run, and shortly after they announced a new album entitled Concrete and Gold. The album marked the band's first with keyboardist Rami Jaffee being an official member, which was pretty stupid considering he basically played on all of Sonic Highways anyway. anyway. The album was produced by Greg Kurstin, who has previously worked with Adele, Sia, Beck, Kelly Clarkson, Pink, Lily Allen, Ellie Goulding. Basically, he's worked with every pop singer in the last 10 years. So we were all interested as to how he'd be able to make a hard rock album. The album was said to be a step towards a more psychedelic sound, taking influence from bands like Pink Floyd, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. There was also a wide array of weird guests on the album, including Justin Timberlake, one of the singers of Boyz II Men, as well as Paul McCartney, who plays the drums on one of the songs. When the album first came out, I planned to do a short review and then later on do a more in-depth review like this one coming up. But I ended up not doing that because I really didn't want to listen to the album again. My opinion of the album has constantly changed in the year and a half since its release, but I can't say it's ever been particularly positive. When it first came out, I loathed it, and I kept listening to it hoping it would grow on me, and it just never did. Then just before I saw the band live last year, I listened to it about 10 more times or so in the hopes that I'd end up liking it. And to be fair, I was more positive towards it by the end of that and consider it to be just a slightly above average album. But man, has the year since that not been kind to this thing. Concrete and Gold isn't just the worst Foo Fighters album, it's one of the worst albums by a band that I love to ever exist. This thing is just not good. There are a handful of songs that I like, but overall this album builds on the mistakes of Sonic Highways to create a messy, bland, forgettable, tedious train wreck. The album is almost completely about the current political landscape, something which I think gives it a lot of potential. I love some good political music, and the band have even managed to do it pretty well before, but there's just something not right here. I think the album actually does start off pretty well. It starts off with a very lo-fi sound on the song T-shirt, almost like a nod to really old folk music. It reminds me a little bit of Dull from The Colour and the Shape. However, at the 30-second mark, the track just explodes. There's some fantastic backing vocals done by Taylor on this track that are layered up like a choir. It's very Queen-esque, and it's something repeated on the album quite a lot, and I really like it. It makes it stand out and makes it quite different to anything that they've ever done before. Although if there's one problem I have with the track, is that the riff that comes in before Dave sings You Get What You Deserve sounds very similar to the riff of their song Wheels. It's really distracting to me because I think it every time I hear the song. The track is very short, clocking in at 1 minute and 22 seconds, but I think it's a really great introduction to the album. It's a massive, exploding, very Queen sounding song. Yeah, it's obvious they basically wants to be Queen mixed with Led Zeppelin on this album, because this album just kind of gushes all over the place with those two influences. And despite its short length, it's actually one of my favourites on the album. Yeah, when your short intro song is one of the best songs on the album, you've done something a little bit wrong. But the track builds up right at the end and leads to... I've talked about Run briefly at the end of my 1x1 review, but let's just talk about it from the ground up here as if I'd never talked about it before. So the track starts off with a very Hallelujah sounding riff, which again is quite distracting because that's literally all I can think of whenever I hear this song. I love the intro to the track. The really airy and distant backing vocals creates this very pretty sound. Dave's soft vocals singing the chorus helps to expand the atmosphere, and the intro sounds so beautiful. And then it starts to build up to that riff. Yeah, it's a little bit underwhelming if you ask me. It just seems like such a simple and repetitive riff. The verses are all based around that riff, with Dave's vocals switching back from screaming and singing normally. To me, I think the verses are really quite boring. It's nice to hear Dave screaming again, but I don't know. I feel like the instrumentation is just so repetitive that it makes the verses feel really grueling. And repetitiveness is something that plays this song completely, especially in the chorus. The chorus has a great melody, don't get me wrong. The chorus is based up of 4 lines, 2 of which are repeated over and over. I really like the line Run For Your Life With Me because it fits in with that dark nature of the song and the album in general. But the rest of the chorus just seems to kind of repeat itself over and over again, and it gets so tiresome by the end of the song. The song follows a theme that hangs over the majority of the album, and that is the theme of escapism. Dave sings about the mess that the world is in today, both politically and socially, and he dreams that he can escape and run away from all of this. And he kind of sings later on how he feels like society is oppressing him and trying to make him live a normal life, whereas he wants to do something different and individual. Lyrically, when it's not repeating the same lines over and over again, it's actually really really damn solid. Like, I'm surprised that Dave even has it in him after some of the lyrics we heard on Sonic Highways and even some of the ones on the last couple songs of Saint Cecilia. Musically, I'm really divided when it comes to this song because I love how it feels like a classic Foo Fighters song, something that on this album is actually really lacking. It reminds me of their earlier, much heavier work, and it's a fast-pounding, aggressive track with memorable riffs and melodies. But at the same time, it's really repetitive, and the only reason things like the riffs are memorable is because a lot of them are incredibly simplistic. Like, the main riff of the song is just 2 notes repeated over and over again. I'm just so split about this song. Part of me really likes it, part of me absolutely hates it. God, I'm so confused. Can I just have a song that I'm not split on? Okay, let me rephrase that. Can I have a song that I'm not split on that's actually good? Do you like generic Led Zeppelin inspired blues rock? If so, you probably like Greta Van Fleet. Well then, I have the perfect song for you. After you've heard the first minute of the song, you've heard the entire song. It's just so mid-tempo, repetitive and boring. The guitar riffs are so forgettable that it hurts. Like, I seriously couldn't even hum it or sing it for you because I just can't remember how it go at all. And the melodies as a whole aren't really anything that special either. Even Justin Timberlake's feature is terrible. Yeah, Justin Timberlake's in this song. He sings backing vocals in the chorus, and honestly, if you didn't know it was him, you'd have no clue. In fact, I didn't even know it was him until I looked at the credits on my vinyl copy. Lyrically, this song isn't great. The verses have this structure where the first line of each bar repeats itself, and it gets really annoying. Literally the first time Dave does it right at the beginning of the song. A lot of the song seems to follow the Wasting Light school of songwriting, where they'll just use famous sayings whether they really work in the context of the song. Like by randomly throwing in "Brother, can you spare a dime" in the chorus, or "Bite the hand that feeds" in the first verse. Lyrically, I literally cannot comprehend what it's about. The track seems to be all over the place and never seems focused, so it's almost like it doesn't actually know what it's about. The song is just an annoying, repetitive mess. But luckily things start to pick up with the following track, "The Sky is a Neighborhood." This song is far from perfect, and honestly I absolutely hated it when it first came out, but it really did grow on me with repeated listens. The song is a massive blues ballad which sounds like this weird blend of the Rolling Stones and Imagine Dragons. The expansive sound sucks you up and has an almost ominous tone to it. This is one of the few songs on the album where I think the political themes come through really well, and I love the addition of that background choir which gives it an almost gospel-esque sound. I love the strings throughout as well. It gives it a really cinematic sound that makes it this really explosive and exciting track. After this is the song La Di Da, which has a very Led Zeppelin-esque progression to it, which sounds pretty damn cool. Yeah, I'm gonna keep comparing these songs to Led Zeppelin because the influence is incredibly on the sleeve here. The instrumentation I generally really like, with the heavily distorted bass lines and vintage sounding synthesizers which give it this really abrasive and weird tone. Here's what I don't like about the song though, the vocal melodies are trash. They're so goddamn repetitive that they ruin what is actually some pretty cool and interesting lyrical content. Except for the la-di-da lyric, which is just shit. Also, the production on this song and much of the album in general is way too crushed and compressed that the song ends up being this abrasive and painful mess to listen to. I love distorted, lo-fi sounding production, but it doesn't work well on this song because there's so much going on that it just becomes this very flat, mid-heavy mess that is such a chore to listen to. It's not the worst song and has a lot of stuff in it that I really like, but it has way too many issues. Dirty Water is one of the highlights on the album for me. I love the very folksy sounding guitar chords and Dave's layered falsetto. The instrumentation is all really great, and lyrically this song is one of the most poetic and fascinating songs on the album. I love the melodies on the verses and chorus as well, and when the song breaks down, man does it feel satisfying. Although the riff is basically just Black Sheep by Metric, and when you're running up against Metric, you're unlikely to win. Unless you're up against Pagans in Vegas, that is. I love the Saw synthesizers in this final part of the song, and Dave's vocals are really great. They have this huge, euphoric blast of energy, which remains probably the most exciting part of the album. The next song, Arrows, is another huge highlight for me. It's one of the more simplistic songs on the album with no cool riffs or anything, but it's got some incredible melodies, great lyrics, and possibly my favourite chorus on the whole album. It's then followed by the worst acoustic song the band have ever done, Happily Ever After, bracket, 0 hour, bracket. Basically, I hate this song. I think it's really cringy, uninspired, and has one of the worst choruses the band have ever done. The pre-chorus and chorus is so repetitive and painful to listen to. Not to mention the production on this song sounds so terrible still. The vocals and acoustic guitars have this weird layer of distortion over them, which makes it unappealing to listen to. And then when you have the clean guitars and choirs come in, they sound absolutely pristine, and it just makes the song sound like a confused, muddled mess. The song is followed up by Sunday Rain, a song that is somehow even worse. This song sees Sir Paul McCartney himself playing the drums while Taylor does lead vocals. When I heard that Taylor was doing lead vocals on a song again, I was so excited because I love Cold Day in the Sun. I remember saying I wanted him to get a chance to sing on this album. But why did it have to be the most bland and forgettable song on the whole album? The song plays like a really bland Eagles song or something, with guitars which, although are drenched in some cool effects, lack any cool riffage to elevate the song. Not to mention the lyrics and melodies are so forgettable and uninspired. I do really like the bridge to the song, but the rest of it is so uninteresting to listen to. I remember it was even the most boring song live when I saw them last year, so it was just an all-around pointless song that is really just there to extend the album out. It's also 6 minutes long, and if Sonic Highways told us anything, it's that when the Foos extend a song out and don't have anything to justify the length of that song, then it just ends up being a repetitive piece of crap that repeats the same thing over and over again until it eventually fades out or just comes to a close. And then we get The Line, which to say is a breath of fresh air would be a fucking understatement. This song is exactly what 2017 Foo Fighters should have been. It has this very huge and catchy style that is reminiscent of classic Foo Fighters songs with a wide array of guitar effects and synthesizers similar to many modern rock bands. The production on this song is so beautiful and expansive without ever sounding crushed and over the top. The melodies are so beautiful and Dave's voice is at his best on this song. I adore the chorus of this thing. Listening to this song gives me vibes of songs like Long Road to Ruin or Walk. It's a very bright, exciting and loud grunge-tinged pop rock song, which is really what this band does best. And because of that, this song ends up being easily one of the highlights and one of the few songs I actually still listen to quite a lot from this album. The album comes to a close with the title track Concrete and Gold, a very fuzzy Pink Floyd sounding song. Like, this song sounds like it was just stolen from The Wall. The chorus reminds me heavily of In the Flesh, and the song has this very progressive and psychedelic sound. This is like Pink Floyd if they turned the distortion up to 11 and used the guitarist from Black Sabbath. The instrumentation is pretty cool on this thing, and I think it's one of the few times in the album that the experimentation works incredibly well. At first I really didn't like this song, but over time I think it's actually kind of grown on me massively. It's nothing really catchy or memorable, but it's a very exciting and loud blast of noise which works really well as a closer. As I said at the beginning of this video, I wanted to end this series with an array of positivity and hope for the future of this band. They're still my favourite band, and their music means so goddamn much to me and has shaped a large portion of my life. But Concrete and Gold just sounded like the final breaths of a band trying to live past their sell-by date. They're incredibly talented and still have some good music in them, but very little of that is presented here. Hopefully the band will cool down a little bit before making another album. They could be like The Cure or Guns N' Roses, who haven't had an album out in over a decade yet still tour loads to massive success. I'm not saying I never want to hear another Foo Fighters album, I just think the best course of action for this band is to take a break from making another album and wait till it's a collection of 12 really great songs that warrant a new album, instead of just forcing something together like it kind of feels like they did with this album. They have enough really great music just to tour and play a set of all their greatest hits. When I saw them live on the Concrete and Gold tour, they were absolutely incredible. Although the Concrete and Gold songs are still not great, they're played well live, they're just not very good songs, so yeah, they ended up being some of the weaker tracks on the set. But when they played Everlong, Learn to Fly, The Pretender, My Hero, all these really great songs, they were untouchable and everyone was having the time of their lives. So maybe that's the best plan of action for them, although I'm sure they'll probably end up making new albums and becoming even worse with time. But hey, as long as they don't do a Metallica and make something like Saint Anger, we should be okay. Thanks to everyone who has watched this series from the start and has kept supporting me and asking for it to come out. Although I've been very slow making it, I have wanted to get it done, and people constantly asking has kind of inspired me to get it out there finally. It took 4 years longer than I planned, but it's finally here. Hopefully the wait was worth it. I know it definitely wasn't, but hopefully someone out there thinks it was. And now that's over, I can go on and slowly review other bands' discographies over multiple years. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon for another full band review, which hopefully there's going to be a lot more of.